Hey everyone, so I'm making this video as right now Mars is pretty much at a total stop, getting ready to move retrograde. So I want to offer some teachings on Mars retrograde in general and Mars retrograde at this particular time. The thing about Mars is it's about action, it's about movement. Mars corresponds in transit and also in our own natal charts how each individual soul will make choices and instinctively orient to the open playing field of life on a moment-to-moment basis. And each choice that we make has a natural consequence. So you do something, you learn. You come back to that objective space of, all right, how did that go? And with Mars, we develop more intelligence. We develop self-knowledge and greater understanding of what actions and what ways of acting are really relevant and useful, because really Mars as an untamed raw energy without wisdom, without self-reflection, is just movement. And the shadow within the Mars signature is just movement. And there's no perspective. It's just this need to stay in constant motion. So when we cultivate this sense of self-reflection and wisdom, we become more refined, more intentional, more clear in our actions. And we say, okay, I have to act. Now, actions create karma. And that's, to me, a very interesting part of this soul journey. Because we inevitably need to act, make choices. And that inevitably opens up a whole new set of experiences or challenges, confrontation sometimes. And yet that's how we move forward. So becoming clear and knowing ourselves, knowing what our path is, and the ability thus to say, no, I'm not going there, I'm not doing this. And to acknowledge, okay, that took me there, that created these consequences. What do I really want to be doing with my energy? That's the Mars journey in general. When we look at Mars going retrograde's always about taking a bigger step back. The retrograde archetype for any planet encourages and invites a radicalization and a liberation from the conditioned ways that we are familiar with relative to that planetary function. So the conditioned ways of acting, how we're used to reacting, how we're used to responding and moving with our impulses, right? Any kind of impulse, anger, rage, lust, fear. Mars says you make choices relative to those. Do I move forward? Do I retreat? Do I wait? How do I want to engage with this big, wide open field of life with the remaining life force energy that I have? With this life that I have, what am I doing with it? So Mars retrograde really invites a deeper introspection and ultimately greater wisdom, greater empowerment to act in ways that are truly relevant and useful for our own growth. So it accelerates growth in that way. The difficulty with Mars retrograde is relative to our conditioning, this impulse to stay in motion and keep on plowing through the same brick wall, which then can lead to an experience of stasis, not acting or not wanting to make any choices. So when you put Mars retrograde in Aquarius, we're applying the Aquarius archetype. And I'll say a few things about this first. It's a potent time. We're in the window right now. This summer is just gonna continue to get more potent. And that's great. We like that, right? Mars is going retrograde in Aquarius, squaring the ruler of Aquarius, Uranus, on the south node of the moon in Aquarius as well. These are very activating signatures, very much about liberation, new direction, new movement, and in particular, liberating from what we think we know and finding a deeper way of abiding, a deeper way of acting. So first, Mars in Aquarius, anything Aquarius, is about liberation from the status quo. The thing about Aquarius is it reflects the essential intelligence, the matrix, the harmonics of creation as it actually is, not as we project it to be. So within Aquarius, we develop a more objective, bird's eye view understanding of the inherent interplay of universal cosmic archetypes, manifesting on every size, scale, and every dimension fractally in all aspects of life. Thus we have astrology, which is an Aquarian field. And we can see, okay, these planets correspond to physiology, it corresponds to psychology, it corresponds to movements in our social reality. Everything can be understood as representing these essential aspects of God's mind. Everything's a projection of inherent source intelligence. And in Aquarius, we begin to understand these patterns. And as we awaken, we see life from the point of view of the soul, from the point of view of the higher mind, which is not lost in personal subjective stories about me and mine and yours. It sees a larger unfolding of consciousness playing with itself in all of its many expressions. Mars in Aquarius is liberating from our projection of what we're doing and where we're going and how we're going to get there. In general, that's what Mars in Aquarius is about. When we have Mars spending this much time in Aquarius, it's been there for a while, it's going to be there for a while, several months. It's really about refining and clarifying and rising above our projections and our stories, our conditioned ideas about what we are doing now, what this thing is all about. The thing about Mars in Aquarius, and you bring it into retrograde, it's like you might have a holographic projection of, okay, this is my life and this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing. And we find that the actual reality of things might have nothing to do with our specific subjective story. That's this interesting thing about this archetype. It's actually easier to create a story about what's not real, to project, okay, this is this relationship, this is how I'm acting, and this is how I'm gonna get to where I'm going. It's easier to do that than to actually see things for what they are. Even though the way things are is inherently, innately, imminently what it is now, to see it means being free from our own need to hold on to a false sense of certainty and knowing. It means abiding in the seat of the higher self, of the soul. And the soul communicates, we can call it the higher self, the higher mind, the larger matrix of creation, which expresses through and as everything in this one ecosystem of life. How does it communicate with itself? Not so much with these linear, clear, boundaried ideas, this and that and going here, and you're this and I'm this and you're me and this is what we do for each other. But it communicates through synchronicity and resonance. Like, how does a forest communicate? How do these trees, how do these beautiful trees and the sky and the sun, it's so intimate. It's so symbiotic. It's so in resonance. And if we will allow it, we really can start to see that everything is in synchronistic resonance with everything else. And so as we breathe, as we take each step in our own life, all of life is inherently stepping and moving with us. There is no such thing as an ecosystem where the growth of one development, one species, is in a vacuum. There's some wind. Let's see how that sounds. Cover this up. So we take for granted certain things like wind. Wind isn't wind, isn't wind. Tree isn't tree, isn't tree. These are not just objects that the mind says are these things. Wind carries a particular resonance. It speaks to something that is just more than the physiology or the geology of what we might describe as wind. Just like my right hand is not just a right hand. Everything reflects the essential intelligence of creation. So this is not an invitation to live in our minds and to be like, oh yeah, a possum passed me and people were talking about children and I was thinking about, do I want to start a family? And then I saw a deer running across and I Googled that and this is what it means. But there is an invitation to step aside from the need to move from the known conditioning ways of thinking, to let life breathe, speak with us. Mars retrograde in Aquarius has a wonderful resonance with the archetype of sitting still, sitting quietly on top of the mountain, gauging a bird's eye view of the entire system of our lives. It is very possible during this time to touch base with a direct experience of what's actually unfolding. See, inherent within each soul is the inherent individuality of the soul that it's always been and that it always will be. Personality is different than individuality. Personality shifts all the time. It's like my sense of self, my sense of person. How do I define myself? But our individuality is very much its own essential archetype. And when we connect with our own individuality, we start to understand that all of life is blossoming and unfolding in resonance with our individuality. And our own journey isn't so much about where am I going or how do I get there, it's more about who am I? What am I? What is this? And the linear, separate mind really loves to apply a sense of meaning and direction. And this is really something that we're just kind of liberating now at this time. This sense of meaning and direction and purpose and Mars. This is where I'm going, these are my actions, this is what I'm doing. There might be an element of truth in it. But then we create so much separation in our conditioned ideas about this. So what really begins to emerge in this space of freedom is I might feel what I'm feeling. I might have these impulses and these fears or these drives to move forward or not. And it doesn't mean that's what you need to do. But there's a wonderful invitation to stop thinking that your story about reality is true. Hold space. Be willing to question everything. In fact, the more we can really notice the premise upon which we're moving, the more we kind of edge upon this possibility of liberation. I'm finding that the moment I realize, oh, this is literally just a thought projection that has been dictating my entire sense of purpose and movement. I think that this is what we are together. I think that this is what I'm doing with my life, with my astrology, with my music, with my van. I think these are all the things that are happening. And yes, maybe I am outfitting my van, maybe I am doing work with music and with astrology, but the actual blossoming and unfolding of it is more like how a flower blossoms. Truth is more like a flower. The evolutionary journey of the soul is more like a flower. And so whatever story we have about the linear progression and order of things, it's wrong. The second you notice what you think is going on, you can rest assured it's not. And that leaves us in this wide open space. Great, then where am I? I find that question, as well as questions like what do I do next, they're not totally honest questions. Meaning, what's actually being vibrated in the energy of where do I go, what do I do, what am I doing here, where am I? The actual energy and vibration of that is really, I desperately need to hold on to something. I need a context because I don't know who I am without one. So that's what's really happening in that insecurity and fear of not knowing. And yet Mars is action. So what emerges from this place is, oh, I'm just trying to act from fear, from insecurity, from anxiety. We are edging upon a great liberation. You don't need to make up a story about your ground. So this square to Uranus and Taurus, and also the ruler of Taurus, and Mars moving over the south node of the moon, it's bringing up all kinds of karma from the past. I mean, it's purging, Mars, purging and purging conditioned tendencies to act out of story. And this can be big. It can really shake our foundation of self-worth and self-esteem. theoretically or hypothetically, when the things that we're familiar with or used to, and the friends, and when things aren't showing up the way we want them to, it can be so easy to say, this is not a friendly universe. I'm threatened, I'm anxious, I don't know what to do now. I'm gonna react out of fear. And to fall back into old patterns of Aquarius, separation. Separation, isolating oneself from the community of your life. That's a shadow in Aquarius. The light in Aquarius is, here we are. I don't need to act to create or deny our unity. The ecosystem and the community is built around me inherently. It's a part of what I am. It's a part of my very physical human biology. It's a part of my soul biology that we harmonize together inherently. It's harmonic, it's resonant. But there's a lot of purging during this time, so to hold space for that, and remember, this is the most important piece I would want to offer. It might feel really scary or anxious or whatever. It doesn't mean something bad's gonna happen. It doesn't mean there's an impending crisis or doom. Huge thing to get. So much of the trauma that we recreate and experience in life isn't because there's some kind of really big trauma and event that's meant to happen. We actually respond to stimuli that elicits fear and trauma by reverting to the old traumatic-oriented thought patterns that perpetuate and recreate and attracts more trauma. Meaning, the characters of our life play are not here to hurt us. They are not here to sabotage our well-being. They are not here to excommunicate, to reject us, to make it hard for us. Our people aren't like that, our body isn't like that, the earth is not like that. But our minds can say it's like that. So beautiful story, I had this, recently a really stressful, couple of weeks. And then I had a dream in the middle, and it felt like everything was just wrong. And I had a dream where I was told that there's pronoia, and that's a book by Rob Brenzi, which is this idea of, it's the opposite of paranoia. Pronoia, everything's out here to support you. And my guides gave me that message, just pronoia. And I woke up and I was like, oh gee, really? And it's just a shift in how I think. So what happens is spontaneous action. Mars retrograde in Aquarius with Uranus in the South Node, when we clear these conditioned patterns, which means we're free in the mind, we can see, in fact, that we can actually step aside, sidestep this whole world of resolving stuff. It starts with the mind. A mind that is clear and free will then manifest a body that is clear and free. Relationships that are clear and free. A mind that is muddled and confused will constantly get back in the same situations of muddled and confusion. The more we evolve, the greater of a capacity we actually have to notice the patterns. That's this thing about objectivity. When we're still kind of in it and we haven't experienced the same archetypes over and over again, we may not see the larger framework. But the more we experience this life journey, the more we recognize, oh, there's a way this stuff works. We have the objective awareness. It's almost like walking through a city. You don't notice that all the roads and paths are laid out according to a really neat geometry. Then you walk through the city up this windy mountain, and the higher you get, you realize, wow, this whole city is constructed brilliantly, and you get it now. So you have this greater perspective of liberation, seeing things for what they actually are. And then zoom, back into the immediacy of this present moment reality, where we have our minds, we have our thoughts. So more and more what becomes possible in this space is action that arises spontaneously, effortlessly, without premeditation. And this is the big Zen koan of Mars retrograde in Aquarius. It's acting without acting, right? Planning without planning, accomplishing and doing without even taking a step. And the reason for this, the reason why this is a big Zen koan, is it is not the separate sense of self, this conditioned story that takes us forward. When we live from our soul, the actions are spontaneous and authentic, and they're complete. Like, there's no trash, there's no debris that's left over. Limited subjective ego mind leaves a lot of residue. You know, we get into relationships, we make choices, we do business ventures, whatever, and there's a lot of stuff left over to then clean up and work with. The beauty, the gem of this freed up energy that we get to explore and really come into is this energy of actionless action. And so it's complete, and then all of your destiny opens up, and it's like, oh, I kind of always thought this is what I was here for, but I thought that it was going to be more like but actually it was just about you being you. And you can't be you and have thoughts about you being you at the same time, because those thoughts are going to be totally off. Being you is so inherently you that you just got to be it. And thus you're acting, but you're not thinking about that. So much love, much peace and restfulness and relaxation and trust and ease during this Mars retrograde time. It's a potent window, and then after it goes retrograde, actually it goes direct, and then it comes back to the degree where it began retrograde in October, and just then Venus begins to go retrograde in Scorpio. So it's like from now until like the end of the year, we are in a potent Mars-Venus retrograde phase. Whew. So it's great soul work, and stick with it, stick with it, stick with it. I'm here with you. We're doing this together. We're all doing this together. Thankfully, obviously, because everything is here now, together. So whatever's emerging now, whatever's arising now, remember that the story you have about your life isn't your solution. It's so much more imminent and immediate and easier, actually. And once again, when we act in that spontaneous, natural way, in resonating with our true soul individuality, we then become available to resonate with the cosmos. Right? So all of life gets to open up. That's where you pay attention to the synchronicities. When our thoughts, right? Think about thought as like, you can move your thought anywhere. And then there's thought that's like, oh, that thought. There's certain kinds of thought that almost like it's like the shape that fits the hole, right? It's like it fits the right hole in that when kids play with those shapes. It's like there's some thoughts that just fit into the universe. Sometimes it's like just the right inquiry, the right question, right? Like these questions that we hold about our life. There's certain questions that are just noise, and it's not really honest. And then there are those questions that are like, oh, that's like a really relevant question. And when we get into that relevant energy, life is aware of it, right? Why? How? It's because it's now. Right? We're authentically vibrating and being ourselves. And like life can meet us there. That's just the beauty about this whole journey. So notice these thoughts, and it's a great time to just become aware. All right, so I'm gonna actually share a little song now. Refine my vision, clear thoughts, clear seeing. I refine my vision, clear thoughts, clear being, clear thoughts, clear being. Hey la lo, hey la lo, hey la lo. Hey la lo, hey la lo. Hey la lo, 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 hey la lo. deeper breathing. Happy Mars journeys to you all. Much love.